What is up, everyone? Happy Fantasy Friday. Today, Book 3 in the Divine Cities trilogy. This one is City of Miracles. So, there'll be at least mild spoilers for the first two books. I've got a review of Book 1 from a few months ago that I will link, and a review of Book 2, but this will be a spoiler-free review for Book 3. And I will also talk about some themes in this book and how they maybe extend to the real world a little bit. And I think people can enjoy that section if they haven't read the series at all. So there'll be timestamps that you can skip ahead to just see that if you want. But anyway, let's get into it. So if you've read the first two books, you know that they both followed a different perspective. And then this third book is following a third different perspective. And that perspective is Sigrid, and Sigrid, it was my favorite of the three, even before reading this book. Who doesn't love Sigrid? So I definitely had high hopes for this book because of that. One thing I didn't like about the first two books was the slow-ish starts to both of them. And to me, this book has the best first half of the book of the three, and that's because, or at least in part because, the inciting incident for this book is just very interesting. Basically, chapter 1, this isn't a spoiler, Shara gets assassinated. And Sigrid, of course, loves Shara, so boom, let's get revenge. Let's see who assassinated her, why. So there's both the revenge that we had in book 1, the mystery element, which is kind of what we had in book 1, but we're definitely more attached to the characters here, and things start happening much quicker than they did in book 1. And I think that might be because, we didn't have to introduce new characters as much, and we had a good mix of new and old characters, and I just love the characters pretty much. So maybe that's why it felt faster to me. Now, who is Sigrid? We know Sigrid, we love Sigrid. He had cool battle scenes in the first book and the second book too. And in the first book, I think his badassness was very much rewarded. He protected Shara, and Shara was doing relatively good things, albeit somewhat technocratic things, with her actions in book 1. And we'll talk more about Technocracy later. But then in book 2, Sigrid's very much punished for kind of doing what he thinks is the right thing, but he kind of just goes way too hard. And Sigrid in book 2 does what he thinks is the right thing, but he doesn't have protection from, the government, and he becomes the most wanted man. And he was definitely in a difficult situation in the second book. So we see some evolution with him in terms of, hey, he thinks he's doing what's right in both cases, but sometimes he is praised and sometimes he's not praised and becomes, an outlaw. So we see him become kind of his own person, right? Because in book 1, again, following around Shara and doing the right thing, and he's rewarded. Book 2, he's kind of just doing what he thinks is right, but he's not following around Shara, so he gets punished. And in book 3, this is the first character we're following that has a strong sense of, hey, this is the morally right thing to do. This is what we should be doing. But Sigrid has no power at all. So there's nothing that Sigrid can do to try to do what's right within the context of the law, because maybe what's right doesn't correspond with what the hegemonic power wants to do. Maybe the hegemonic power doesn't want to do what's right. And now I want to talk about the villain. The villain is a mysterious figure, we could say. And when we meet the villain, they clearly have some divine powers, but the villain gets social and cultural powers within society by kind of just being a demagogue. In my book 1 review, I talk about some of the problems with technocracy and, maybe Shara doesn't have the Continental's best interest at heart with what she's doing. She maybe has some ulterior motives, and maybe Mulagesh has some ulterior motives as well within book 2. But the villain sees some of the problems with the technocracy, and he claims he can solve them. If he were the emperor of the entire world, all the problems in the world would go away. There would be no oppression, there would be no colonization, people would be treated fairly. And that, of course, is every demagogue in history's approach to getting followers. Just the, hey, you have problems? I can solve them. And now, kind of the theme that I've been dancing around this whole video, technocracy. First of all, what is technocracy? So the exact Google definition is the government or control of society or industry by an elite of technical experts. So, in a lot of cases, that sounds great. For example, do masks work? I don't have any sort of medical expertise, so I have to kind of look at research maybe and trust research. Or if I don't look at research because I have a normal job and I like to read fantasy books, what sort of technocratic institution can I trust to give me the right information? And ideally, something like the CDC or a group like that with, medical experts and people who have gone over the research, that's a great group of people to trust. Same with vaccines. Hey, let's trust this group of people who understand vaccines to tell us if they work or not. Spoiler, vaccines work and masks work. And while technocracy is very good at answering questions like, do vaccines work or do masks work, we can't rely on the technocrats to say, should we have a vaccine mandate or should we have a mask mandate? To answer those questions, we have to think about and talk about what we as a society value. So if we mandate vaccines for, let's say, hypothetically, chickenpox, some may say that gives them less freedom because they're being forced to get vaccinated. However, others would argue that if your child gets vaccinated for chickenpox and my child gets vaccinated for chickenpox, then your child will have a lot lower of a chance of giving my child chickenpox, which actually makes my child more free to go out in public without fear of getting a very horrible, severe illness. So yeah, those are kind of the two sides. And we can't answer those questions exclusively with the technocratic scientists. We need to, as a society, kind of sort of maybe agree, or hopefully mostly agree to do something, or to do nothing maybe. You can apply the same thing to sugary drinks. Are sugary drinks bad for you? Well, yes, they are. But is it too impositional on freedoms of people to ban, Starbucks lattes or whatever? So the argument to ban sugary drinks has less of an argument for it, because if I have like a Diet Coke here, I'm not actually hurting anyone other than potentially myself, I guess. And there's stuff in the middle too, like smoking, for instance, where if I smoke in this room, no one's in this room with me, so I'm not giving people my secondhand smoke. But maybe if I were smoking in like a crowded bar or a movie theater, that might be a lot worse, because people would be subjected to my secondhand smoke, and that would hurt their health. It would hurt their lungs, or again, according to scientists. Now, that doesn't mean we have to ban smoking in every bar, but it's good public health to do so, especially for the people who are not smoking. And it actually makes people more free. People can go to a bar and not worry about an increased risk of lung cancer if they don't want to smoke. Now, let's talk about hypothetical corruption of technocrats. So, let's stick with the smoking example. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, the tobacco lobbyists would hire their own scientists to say, oh, smoking, like, it probably doesn't cause lung cancer and it's not, like, bad. Like, don't listen to any scientist other than the ones that big tobacco companies hire. Now, do you see the problem with technocracy in terms of conflict of interests and stuff of that nature? And that is exactly what we saw in book one. Finally, we're bringing it back to the Divine Cities trilogy. We had Shara on the continent and the scientists, what was his name? Pangui? Now, these were not continentals, but they were installed by the not continentals to determine the policies that should be imposed on the continentals. Like, they don't have the continentals' best interests at heart. They both report to the oppressors. They report to the people who want to exploit the Continentals for labor and for their own power. And in book one, Shara and Sigrid do things that are objectively good for the people of Bulakov. I think there's like no arguing that. But that's not really their goal. Their goal is to kind of like root out rebel groups and do all this stuff to kind of keep oppressing the Continentals, the people of Bulakov. But in this book, it's weird because Sigrid isn't beholden to anyone. He's more of like kind of a regular citizen. And he sees the problems and the shortcomings with technocracy. And that is kind of like a theme of this book. Whose side will win out? Will it be kind of like the technocratic side that has kind of failed the people of Bulakov, and that actually the demagogue villain of this book has used the failures of the technocracy to persuade people to say that he can fix them, even though he doesn't care about fixing them, he just cares about his own power? Or will it be a more kind of like, hey, let's have the people have some amount of self-determination for what they think will be the best for their society? And it kind of examines all of those three kind of systems of society: the evil emperor, lord, ruler, king, the technocracy, and then the kind of social, very democratic, very, freedom, anti-colonialist sort of approach. And to me, that was just fascinating to have that as like the undertone, the theme, the broad sort of message of this book. And all these books have like messages from gods at the end of the books or whatever, and they're kind of like longer monologues, and I enjoy them. And this one had the best one, in my opinion. And it's so interesting because I personally, in my life, feel like I have learned about some of the shortcomings of technocracy from between the years of like 2013 and 14, where Robert Jackson Bennett was probably writing the first book, and like, later 2016 and 17, where he was writing the third book. And I think a lot of us in society probably realize some things about the way society is run and kind of the shortcomings of technocracy. So, and it's interesting because a lot of times people enjoy watching a writer develop and become a better writer as they read the series. I think I enjoyed reading this series and watch Robert Jackson Bennett becoming a better person and becoming kind of a more inclusive person. Not to say he was like a bad person when he wrote book one, obviously. I'm not saying that. But I think he's learned some things, and I love that. I love that. And I will be reading Foundry Side at some point. It's jumped up my list because of this book. And man, I don't know if anything I've said in this review makes any sense to anyone at all. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching me ramble. And I haven't like done a deep dive on Robert Jackson Bennett's views on technocracy or anything like that. I usually don't do deep dives on authors, but I don't know. If anyone wants to like fact check some of the things I'm saying about my sort of intuitions about Robert Jackson Bennett and how he's kind of grown as a person, and maybe like change some views, maybe not explicitly changed his views, but I don't know, kind of like grown as a person in terms of like his views on governance over society and, society building, government building, policy building, making, all that stuff. Yeah, feel free to let me know in the comments below, or just comment something else like that's actually about the book if you want. Or I don't know, just like leave an emoji to say hi. Join my Discord. It's very fun. And like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, all that stuff. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.